So I have a question for you. If, let's say I'm not an athlete, I don't have all this body ache and pain, and yoga's, it's okay, but as an athlete, I'll get more out of it. But as an individual who has maybe anxiety, as an individual that has maybe depression or some form of mental health issue, how would you explain to them that, okay, you get into yoga, maybe your body is okay, but this will help you more than just your body. It's the total healing of yourself, right? So, how do you get them to want to join?
So I try to preface it by telling somebody, don't worry about everyone else. Your practice of yoga is for you.
Yeah.
So don't worry about what poses the teachers are doing in
Yeah.
front. Don't worry about the poses your classmates are doing. But do what you're comfortable with. Oftentimes what happens is there's always a sense of comparison. We talked about social media. It's always comparison.
Yeah.
So do know that when you enter into your practice, it's about you.
Yeah.
It's about yourself, and it's about what your journey is going to be about, right? And that's one thing you always just need to circle back to. When you feel like, oh, I'm not doing well enough in yoga, well, who's to say that you aren't?
Yeah.
Right? Like you could, just because you can't do, let's say, a tree pose, doesn't mean necessarily that you're not a good practitioner.
Yeah.
It just means that you can't do a tree pose.
Yeah.
That's the physical part of it.
Yeah.
And like we said, physical is just a small percentage of the entire thing. But what's more important is that what you take away from your yoga session is how your body actually feels, how your mental state feels. What we tend to forget is that yoga, and this is why a lot of yoga teachers are against, let's say, different forms of yoga where it's just about physical exercise, right? You've heard probably of, like, for example, like hot yoga, or like
Bikram,
say
or
Bikram yoga and whatnot. And at the end of the day, it's because people want it as a physical sense of exercise.
Yeah.
So I always try to tell them that when you enter that particular practice, know that that's what you're looking for.
Okay.
You don't go into Bikram yoga. So Bikram yoga is all about fixed positions, right? There are 20 or so positions that you can do, and it's done in sequence, and it's done in a hot room.
Yeah.
Like, where basically you're just made to sweat.
Yeah.
But there's no actual movement philosophy behind it.
Okay.
It's just about moving and moving and moving.
Oh, okay.
The idea behind it was just movement to get people to go and to get going, right? And which is great. But then it became tarnished with what was being done on the other side.
Okay.
And so this is why I always say choosing your yogi matters, because the person who's going to guide you in that journey should be able to help you, as you're moving along, and not discredit you, not just discourage you, but they should inspire you to want to do more.
So that's really important, because I know there are a lot of yogis or yoga instructors out there that are more on the physical side.
Yeah.
And I think you have the totality of it, right? You have both the spiritual, mental, and physical all blended into one, which is tremendous.
Yeah.
Right? Because if we're looking to help a teenager who's already experiencing anxiousness and OCD, or a young adult or whatever, these are things where, hey, let's get you into something where you become a little more mindful. You learn your mindfulness at a young age. You learn your presence, to be present at a young age, or at a younger age, or even, hell, you can be 70s and still do this, right? And help more for your physical body, and maybe they'll get a little more mindfulness as well. But I think it's really important.
So here's another word that we always, so people always throw out, like, mindfulness there, right? But another one I always like to include also is gratitude.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the third one is kindness.
Kindness is,
all right. So it always happens whenever I teach. So whenever I teach like, I don't teach large groups of people. I'll usually do it individually or whatnot. And the reason why I tried to get into the whole yoga thing was because I was doing a lot of it online with my clients. Like, physically, we just couldn't see each other.
Yeah.
Right? I had this one client that was in Norway, and there was no way I was going to fly to Norway during the pandemic.
Yeah, of course.
And so a lot of it was, again, circling back to, first of all, bringing that sense of mindfulness, bringing that sense of gratitude, and finally bringing that sense of kindness. And so why those three? Well, mindfulness, so that you can bring yourself to the present, okay? Gratitude, because what you want to do is you want to be thankful that you can actually be in that space.
Yeah.
That you actually have the ability to be with a professional who can help you and guide you. Be grateful that you have time for yourself, that you can actually do that.
Yeah.
And kindness, because no matter how big or small the success is, the fact is it's success.
Yeah.
It might not be like that grand idea of success that you have, But the fact that you succeeded or you're able to do something, you should be kind to yourself that you were able to do that.
That's a difficult thing to do. You know,
Absolutely.
most people have. I don't know about most people. Myself, I'm not kind to myself. I'm like, you should be better at this.
It's always like, not good enough.
Yeah, exactly,
not good enough.
Exactly. You know, and that's constantly in my head. You can do better. You can do better. And I'm like that with my kids. You can do better. You got second place, but you can do better, right? you know, don't. My youngest one got second place in gymnastics, and she's bragging about it. First of all, I don't like bragging. Okay, don't brag. You know, for second place, there's someone better than you. Don't brag. If you're first place, maybe then you can start bragging. But even then, it's still bad, right? So don't brag. And you know, it's something where I don't know. I just feel like, you know, the kids need to be in a better mental space. They need to be more aware of what they're doing. They need to be, you know, kinder to themselves and learn how to be kinder to themselves, and me not push them to not think they're good enough, right? So I have to do a better job as a parent to ensure that, you know, I'm making sure that these kids understand that they're doing a good job, and they're not going to be harsh on themselves the way I'm harsh on myself, and that's a hard thing to do.
I'll give you an example. When I first moved here in 2015, I was always compared. Oh, so are you like this guy? Are you like this? I'm like, no, not really. But I'm like,
I'm Francis Diano.
I'm like, and I would just explain. I was like, I just do something different.
Yeah.
And so it's always that. And so understanding that it's okay to have something different. It's okay to not necessarily conform to what everyone thinks is their definition of success or definition of what things should be.
Because that pressure in itself it weighs down on a person.
Absolutely. And you've been to my office several times. You know that my office is far from that. We're very non-conventional.
I love it.
Exactly. And when people say, oh, so who's your competition? I was like, well, we don't really compete with anyone because I don't compare myself to anyone. We don't compare ourselves to anyone in that sense, because what we want is a personal journey for you. And so that's how you should treat your practice in yoga. It's about your personal journey, where you want to take it. And so sometimes I always emphasize with people that, or not sometimes, all times I emphasize with people, choose the person who's going to help you with that. And so I have my clients where I help, where, for example, I have one where they have eating disorder. And it's not because I'm telling them this is what you should eat, I'm being their psychologist and whatnot. But again, it's practicing those three things: mindfulness, gratitude, and kindness. And when we practice that, they feel like they're in a more secure state so that they can be more physically active.
I think that those are great points. Those are really, really good points. You know, mindfulness, I think, is really key, especially in mental health. Kindness is a huge, huge key, because a lot of people, unfortunately, are not kind on themselves. And gratitude, we don't show it enough, right?
Absolutely.
What I've started doing in my home, just to change the way, you know, the hope is to change the way my children think. You know, instead of being negative all the time, after dinner or in the middle of dinner, we go around the table and say, what are you thankful for today? What's the one good thing that happened to you today? Versus, you know, letting them think about all the bad things. But then after getting used to saying, you know, the one good thing they had for the day, now it's not even just one good thing. They're saying 2 or 3 or 4. So they're looking at the positives. And that's something I feel will do them wonders. And they look forward to doing it. You know, it's a practice, I think, that's important.
And that's one thing, like even in our house, that's one thing my wife does with myself and our sons. Well, one son, because the other one can't talk yet. It's like, what's your favorite part of the day? And you know, it could be anything as, oh, it was swimming. Or it was going to school. Or it's that we're all here together. And you know, whatever it is. But the idea is to say, what was your favorite part of the day? And it's also so that, you know, I always, like, I always remind, like, we remind our little one, he's only 4, but we always have to remind him, it's like, you know, you're luckier than most. You know, you have all these things that you can do. You have all these people who help you. So always be nice, okay? Say thank you. So like when we're in the elevator, he always has to say good morning. We always tell him to say good morning or whatnot.
That's great. Those are great practices. It's a good thing. And you know, I think you see well-raised children that practice all these things. I know other kids that don't always say hi to all the adults, and it doesn't have the best look.
They have that snobby look.
Yeah, right? And it's like, you know, it doesn't matter who you are or who your parents are or who your grandparents are. You should always greet, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think and I remember my wife and I were talking about this before. That's one of the things that's interesting here about the Philippines, is that sense of entitlement weighs on a lot of people. It's like they don't care. Like they immediately are like, oh, I'm so and so. I'm from so and so.
Yeah, and bringing that back to mental health, that could do two things. That kid could be the one to bully other
Absolutely.
kids, or that kid might have their own demons inside that they're not able to deal with.
Absolutely.
Right. So it's really giving them coping mechanisms. For me, I relate it to children because I have children, and I know my eldest is, she has OCD. She's been diagnosed with it, and I want to give her some mindfulness techniques. I want to help her learn how to deal with these things, and I want to make sure my other children, see what's going on and learn and are given tools to deal with it, right? And I've seen firsthand what trying to compete with other people can do. I've seen firsthand with how kids don't have the resiliency, right? How we need to teach them or give them tools to have that. And so it's really important for me that children, not just my own, but all children, start to learn these things. And hopefully talks like this will help, right?
Sometimes using the word yoga
Yeah.
for them tends to be intimidating already. Like, at least in my experience before, especially because my professionals handling people who are injured, sometimes people take a negative connotation to yoga because they said, oh, I hurt my back doing yoga because I went too hard or I did a pose I wasn't supposed to. So I try not to enter them into that realm or say, okay, we're doing yoga first. Right? I try to just teach them movements that are based in yoga. That eventually when they're doing well through it, I'm like, you've actually been practicing yoga for a while, so why don't you try it?